Welcome to the Green Ops Podcast, where we give you tips and tricks each week to become harder to kill. My name is Luke. I am your host and an instructor with Green Ops, joined today by Melody Lauer. Is that correct? I said it right?
That is correct. Yes,
Awesome. You, owner, operator of Citizens Defense Research, right?
that is correct.
All right, I'm nailing it tonight. So,
You are. You got it.
we're going to talk about not only her company, Citizens Defense Research, but she has a awesome class called like an armed parent background. So I want to talk to her a little bit about that. I have kids. She has kids. A lot of listeners have kids. So I think it'd be good information. But before we get started, make sure you like, subscribe, share, send to a friend, send to your mother. Make sure we keep growing the podcast. So without further ado, how are you doing this evening?
I am doing so well. And thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate this. It was such a great opportunity to meet you guys down in Virginia at the class that we were both at. And you guys were killing it. And we were having such a great time. So I'm honored that you had me on.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. I don't know that we were killing it, but we were
You guys
having
were
a great
doing
time.
great.
We were
Yeah.
having a great time.
I just
So
I just remember taking so many pictures of you because you were so happy the entire weekend. And I was like, oh, he's so happy. I gotta take lots of pictures of him being happy.
So we just did a podcast like 2, 3 weeks ago with Steph and I, and we were talking about the class. And one of the things that we said is Steph and I were the two that showed up the most unprepared, not really knowing what we were getting ourselves into. And it kind of made the class, obviously made it fun because I was laughing and enjoying myself, but it put it in context a little bit. It was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I don't know that I'm ever going to carry a revolver other than a 2-inch J frame. So I might as well use that during the class. It was awesome. It was such a phenomenal experience. So but I was definitely underwater sinking there for about half that
No,
class.
it was so great though, because that is what that class is geared for. And I actually listened to that podcast that you did. And I think you were right because you said on the podcast that like you expect classes like that to draw a bunch of that kind of niche people, right? Like your revolver people. And the fact that you guys were there and we're just kind of like, we don't know what we're doing. Like that's what it was for. And you guys kept up so well, which I think really proves, and as an instructor yourself, you know this, like if you've got a really good curriculum, you're going to be able to bring the newbies along with the experienced people. And that is really what demonstrates that you've got a really good thing going on is everybody can learn and everybody can have fun no matter your skill level.
Sure, absolutely. So let's talk about because that revolver course is offered through Citizens Defense Research.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about like your background and Citizens Defense Research and how that whole thing got started.
Oh my gosh. I knew you were going to ask this, so I was kind of like, how do I condense this into like a 30-second sound bite? And I just don't think I can. So really how I guess how I came about was kind of I tripped and fell in it. And I know that's going to sound funny, but before we started the recording, I was talking to you kind of about moving around the country, with my husband, young married, and he was traveling a lot at the time. And one of the things we had guns at home, for home defense, and he asked me if I wanted to get my permit to carry. And I was only 20 at the time, so I wasn't even of the legal age to get my permit to carry. And I told them that I would consider it, but that I understood that it was a really grave responsibility, right? Like this was not just something that, I was going to just slap on my side and be like, okay, I'm prepared. So after thinking about it for a while, I told him I will get my permit to carry under 4 conditions. One, I need to pick my own gun. Two, I need to get professional level training that isn't you. Three, I need to practice on a regular basis. And four, I need to get continuing education, at least one class per year. And I honestly thought he was going to go, no, that's too much. Like, never mind. But he actually was like, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. And I was like, oh, okay. So that got me started on, researching firearms and researching classes. And I actually took my very first class with Greg Hamilton of Insights Training Center. Fantastic class, a great, great way to put me on the right path. And I kept true to my word. I practiced every week. I went to the range that I was going to locally, had a ladies' night where ladies got to shoot free. And after months of going there by myself and practicing every week, they offered me a job. And I was like, but I don't know anything. And they're like, that's okay. We'll teach you. And they were true to their word. And honestly, I got so lucky in that opportunity because you know as well as I do that there are some really bad gun ranges out there. And these people were well educated, they were good on their tactics, they had great knowledge, and they really did, again, put me on a good path. And I just never stopped. Like I kept taking the classes. Before I knew it, they had said that in order for me to help out on the range, I need to have my instructor certification. So I went and got instructor certification, and it just kept going. And then I got the next one and the next one. And before you knew it, I'm starting a company, and here I am.
Awesome. So real quick, you said you got to pick out your gun. What did you pick? What was that very first one?
Oh, it was the worst gun ever. I
Of
do
course
not
it
recommend
was.
it. I got it for all the wrong reasons. It was a Kimber Ultra Carry in 40 Smith and Wesson. It was
That's
awful.
that is awesome. And what color
It
was
was
it?
it was black and stainless. It was aluminum
Okay.
body and the stainless steel top. So it wasn't like a, pink or purple or teal or whatever. But that thing, you could not get a single magazine through it without three malfunctions. It was the worst, and it was just awful. That was the worst gun possible, but it was such a great learning experience for me.
Sure.
And then I went and got a Wilson Combat after that.
Oh, you upgraded a little bit.
Yeah, I went to a Wilson Combat Professional, and I carried that thing for 6 years. So
That
um,
that sounds awesome. So everybody,
I
I
still
tell a
have
lot,
it too.
so I tell a lot of students, they ask what to buy or what to get, and a lot of times in like the AR space, because there's always the people
Mhm.
that are like, "Hey, I want an AR, and I also only want to spend $250," and I understand that niche is a thing, but I always tell them, "Hey, spend what you can, get what you can." And then go shoot the crap out of that gun and learn that, hey, this isn't what I need or what I want. Or maybe you do shoot it a bunch and say, hey, this is exactly what I need. Like inform your own decision. You kind of did that, right? You bought a Kimber. You went and
Mhm.
shot it a lot. You were training every week at
I
ladies'
was.
night, right? So, and then you made that
Yep.
informed decision that, you know what? I don't think I'm going that route again. We're going to go somewhere else.
I really was. I was so grateful that the people around me gave me the opportunity to make that mistake. And it really was a mistake, but it was a good mistake. It really was. Nobody, I mean, well, I say nobody tried to stop me. That's not true. When I went to go and pick it up, when I went to go and buy it, the gun store owner tried to talk me into, guess what? A J frame,
Oh,
because, we've got some ladysmiths over here, which kind of ticked me off. But frankly, I probably would have been better off with the ladysmith. But the people around me were like, no, if you've done your research and this is what you want, okay, fine, go ahead, buy it. And now, granted, the reason why that worked is because, like you said, I was going to the range every single week. This was not just a gun that I picked up and I put in my sock drawer and went, okay, I guess I'm protected now.
right.
And it allowed me to realize very quickly. I mean, I went shooting with it within 24 hours and wanted to throw it out the window within that 24 hours. Um, and we sent it back to Kimber. I mean, we put a lot of time and effort into trying to get that gun working, and it just never did. So eventually, we did sell it, and
Right.
with full disclosure to who bought it, like, hey, this is a piece of work. But it really did. It was such a great stepping stone for me to come into my own and be like, no, this is what I want. This is why I want it. And then for me to figure out, oh, these are the reasons why it's not working for me. And now I'm going to go and fix those problems with another 1911.
But you bought a really good one. So that's all that
I
really
did.
matters.
And that one, to this day, like I don't carry it anymore. I have not carried it in a very long time. And we can get into why later. But I'm so nostalgic for that gun because it was the most reliable. It was the I mean, it was such a good gun. After I went through that Kimber phase and went to my Wilson Combat, I will have a special place in my heart for that gun, probably until the day I die.
So years ago, I took a class from Steve Fisher, and he was shooting a Nighthawk custom 9mm 1911. And I remember watching him shoot that gun, and it seemed like when he wanted to shoot fast splits, the slide would keep up. would go in like 0.17, 0.18. But then when he wanted to do like half-second splits, it was almost like the slide would only keep up with his splits. And I was like, that is the most beautiful piece of machinery I've ever seen. Naturally, I went home and looked up Nighthawk Custom, trying to get a custom 9mm 1911, and it was way out of the
I was
budget.
gonna say, did you almost have a heart attack and be like, oh, okay.
Yes, I did. But I've always had a love for like those custom 1911s. Gosh, they are just beautiful, beautiful pieces of art.
They are my favorite. I mean, honestly, I will have a special place in my heart for 1911s probably until the day I die. They are by far my favorite handgun.
That is awesome. So, obviously you got into guns some years ago. You started training fairly heavily. I would say if you're shooting once a week and taking a class a year minimum, that is training a good amount. What made you come up with Citizens Defense Research?
So really was that was born out of me becoming a mom. So I had already been an instructor, but I wasn't, I was an instructor. I was helping out at the range. I was doing really small classes and stuff, but I had no inklings or desire to become a national instructor. I wanted to help out people in my local area. And then I had my first child, and I really realized that I remember bringing my kid home from the hospital, and he's in the carrier, and I'm looking around our house, and we've got like guns over here and guns over there and guns in the corner and guns over here, and I'm like, uh we might have to make some adjustments here because we were already such gun people. um and so and then I started going to the range, and I was like, well, every day that I go, because I was still keeping up with my training schedule, and I was like, I'm gonna have to shoot one-handed if I'm carrying my child. So that's when I realized that one-handed, like I was shooting a 45 very well with two hands, but one-handed, my recoil control was just, it was crap. So that's when I was like, you know what? It might be time to, say goodbye to the .4 and embrace the 9mm. And that's when I went to a Glock 19. And I've been carrying Glock variants ever since. And then so that was really what started me down this road of like, how do I make carrying fit with, and I also worked, interestingly enough, I also worked at a parenting center at the time as well. So I had two jobs. I would go to the gun store and range and work there. And then I would go in the afternoons to the parenting center where we would teach childbirthing classes and attachment parenting stuff, and I knew I really, really wanted to embrace all of those things. I wanted to baby wear, I wanted to co-sleep, I wanted to do all these things, but I still wanted to do it while being armed and prepared. And I realized that there was so little overlap in these, and when I would try to talk to people, they would say very unhelpful things like, oh, just throw it in your purse or something like that. And I'm like, absolutely not. And and then I would go to classes here, and I would ask questions about like, well, what if I had a kid, or what if my child was with me? And a lot of times I'd get like, like, I don't know, I guess make it work, that kind of stuff. But the straw that kind of broke the camel's back was, I don't know if you remember hearing about it, it was on national news. It was quite a few years ago now. The day after Christmas, there was a woman in Washington State who her husband had gotten her a concealed carry purse for Christmas. And this woman, I did some research on her after the fact. She was a lot like me. She was wanting to do it right, right? She was taking the training. She was getting the education. She was involved in the shooting communities and the shooting sports. And she wanted to carry her gun on a regular basis. And her husband, thinking that he was supporting her on this journey, got her a designated concealed carry purse for Christmas. And the day after Christmas, she took it out with her 2-year-old son and her mother. And the son got access to the firearm and killed her in Walmart. And I kept like that story. My daughter was the same age as her son was at the time, and I had this strong sense of like, but for the grace of God, there go I. You know what I mean? And I called up my friend and mentor, Kathy Jackson, who she was I'm not sure if you know who she is. She retired a few years ago, but she was a very, very amazing firearms instructor at the time. And I was on the phone with her, and I was just venting to her. And I was just like, Kathy, this is ridiculous. This should have never happened. There should have been a, education for her. There should have been a class about, what to do and how to keep your firearms safe. And Kathy just kept asking me questions. And she'd just be like, well, Melody, what would you do to prevent that kind of situation? I'm like, well, these are the things that I would put in place that would keep that from happening. And, this and that. And she just kept asking all these questions. And then towards the end of our conversation, she goes, well, Melody, if not you, then who?
Right.
And I went, ooh. I'm like, but why me? And she's like, because you have come up with answers to all of these questions through your hard work. Like, none of these things have you just pulled out of the air. She's like, every question I have asked you, you have come up with 4 or 5 or 6 points as to why, based upon your training and your understanding, this should be corrected. And she's like, they're all valid points. You've already thought of all of this. If not you, then who? And I still kind of hemmed and hawed about it. And at the time, I was also involved in an online group for moms who want to carry guns. And I was seeing a lot of women who were attempting to do what I was doing, which was doing the attachment style parenting, baby wearing and stuff like that, while trying to figure out how do I incorporate a gun into all of this? Because your traditional holster systems don't always work. And I watched this one woman. I was absolutely horrified. She had a baby wrap, and her solution to carrying the gun and the baby was to take the gun and put it with no holster in the wrap with the baby. And I was absolutely mortified. So I came up with a class called Baby Wearing and Carrying, where the whole premise of it was you come, you bring your wraps, whatever you would use to wear your baby, and you bring whatever holsters you have available. And it was a workshop, and we make it work. And we go through how to safely draw. We go through, what kind of holster systems would work with the baby wearing solutions that you've come up with, how to do it safely, how not to do it, like the absolute no's, the absolute yeses. And the media happened to be there and took video of this class, and it went national. It went viral. It went national. And I got some interest from some other people in the industry, one of whom was John Johnston of Ballistic Radio. And he contacted me and had me on his radio show. And then he asked me, he said, have you ever considered making this like more than just baby wear and carrying? Like, have you ever thought about making this more like tactics and stuff? And I said, absolutely, I would love to. I just don't have the resources. And he said, what do you think about teaming up and doing that? And so we did, and we made the Armed Parent Guardian class.
So that's almost the flagship for Citizens Defense Research, then that either
Yep.
that baby wear and carry that then turned into Armed Guardian.
Yep.
So how many of those so how long ago was that? How long has Armed Guardian been going on? It's been a few years now.
Oh yeah, that was started in, I believe, late 2016.
Okay. And so you are still currently teaching that regularly nationwide.
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
so obviously baby wear and carry, while I guess it could work for men or dads, Armed Guardian probably more so for dads. What do people, as somebody that's signed up for that class, what should they be expecting to get out of the Armed Parent class or Armed Guardian? I'm sorry.
Well, so the vast majority of people who've taken it, so Caleb, you've met Caleb now. Caleb, when he took the class, he came out of it and he said, wow, he said, you did a really clever thing. He's like, you disguised a thinking class as a shooting class. Good job. So what they can expect is, so it really, even though it is geared towards parents, I think this is one of those classes where anybody really could benefit from it, because even if you do not have kids yourself, you probably have nieces and nephews, or you're probably out in public around people that you care about that are non-combatives, right? Spouses, friends, whatever. And this class really does talk about all of those issues with at least some emphasis on children. So what it starts out with is day one, we go through 4 hours of lecture, and that lecture is what we call defining the problem, right? Looking at what violence looks like when in a family unit. So a lot of times when we're in classes and we're learning about violence, it's always like me, I'm alone, and there's a bad guy. And there's no other consideration taken, right? It's just like, this is what the bad guy's behavior looks like, this is what your behavior, and then how do you respond? How do you make it work? But at least for myself, I can't remember the last time I was out in town without my family, you know? So what we did was we found a bunch of videos of people who were in violent situations with their family present and saw how having your family present complicates matters, right? You can't just run away if you've got a 2-year-old hanging onto your leg. You can't just, you know, start a fist fight if you've got, if you're holding on to your little baby. You can't, and there's so many different things that you can't do. And even if you try to do them, we have one video of a dad who tries to fight and he's backing up and ends up tripping over his own 2-year-old. And he's on the ground, he's holding one kid, his wife is pulling on him. It's just a complete disaster because he's got loved ones in present. So we go over that. We kind of go over the hey, how does having your loved ones with you complicate self-defense? Then we go over specifics attacks on children, and we differentiate the two because the vast majority of violent attacks are not directed towards children, thank God, right? Because the vast majority of criminals don't actually want to go after kids because kids have nothing that they want, right? Your standard violence or your standard criminal behavior is usually, trying to get something, right? Get the keys to your car, get the money from your wallet. And the 2-year-old doesn't have that. So thankfully, the vast majority of violence is not directed towards children, but that doesn't mean that not all violence is not directed towards children. And when you have specifically targeted violence towards children, that's an entirely different ballpark. So we talk about targeted violence towards children, ways to prepare kids for that, ways to defend them against that and protect them. Then we go into just the psychology of criminals just in general. Then a little bit of gear, some legal stuff. We also talk, I was lucky enough to consult with Massad Ayoob and Andrew Branca in talking about the legalities of defending yourself and defending your children. So we go over the legalities of that. So that's all in the first 4 hours. And then the second 4 hours of day one are getting everybody up to speed, right? Just think of like a standard pistol class, right? Making sure everyone can safely draw from the holster, basic accuracy, basic manipulations of firearms. And that's all day one. Then day two is the nuts and bolts of, all right, how do you draw a gun while we use backpacks as child substitutes, right? So how do we draw a gun while holding onto a child? Accuracy, one-handed shooting. Then we talk about tactics in getting children out of the fight, when to do that, when to not do that, how to do that safely, especially at given different age ranges, right? Because how you would rapidly put down a newborn that's less than 6 weeks old, perhaps, is going to be radically different than someone who's 2 years old, who you can kind of put down a little bit more forcefully. And then we continue to work our way up in age. So we start with little babies in arms. We go up to, kids that are standing 2, 3 years old, but you might be hanging onto their hand, but you don't want them just to be free roaming just yet. Then we go up to teenagers and then straight up to adults. And hey, this person is with you. You are taking responsibility for them, but they're not going to help you. They're not co-combatants with you. They're just kind of cluelessly there, and you're taking responsibility for them. But now you need to be able to get them out of the way. You need to be able to maybe pilot them from one location to another safely without running risk to them by your response. And we go through all of that. So it's a pretty comprehensive all-around course for just anybody who is with you, whether they're child or adult, that is not going to help you, but you're going to take responsibility for them.
And you said it earlier, like everybody's, I guess, fantasy is that it's me versus the other guy. And we're just going to get it on, right? And we're just going to see what happens. But in reality, most likely there's going to be someone else there. if it's a kid, even if it's like just an adult family member or something, it complicates everything. You're not lying. And we're seeing, like, right now, we're
Yeah.
seeing all these videos, like crazy stuff that's coming out of Israel, the people in like cars. What if you got to get out of that car? You now have children, and we're not saying we're going to get out of the car and get in a fight. Maybe we just got to get out of the car and run. It's not as simple as opening the door and just going, right? There's so much
No.
more to think about. And I think that class, it really will open eyes to a lot of people that say, hey, I got a lot more to think about. In my mind, I've played this game where, yeah, I'm just going to draw my gun and shoot the people. And then in reality, it's like, oh, no, no, no. You got these 2 or 3 other people that are with you that maybe are running the wrong way. You're trying to keep them safe. You don't know what you're doing. So the utter chaos is eye-opening, right? Just to say the
Well,
least.
and they might not even be your family members. So we have videos of people who get into shootings where kids are, it's somebody else's kids. And they are now like they're in a mall or they're at a shopping center or they're even at a gas station. And here's this 12-year-old girl that she's not your kid, she's not their kid, but she's a kid and she's there. And she's, that is now a consideration that you have to put into your math and how you're going to respond, or at least you should, right?
Right.
And there might be another situation where, we bring this scenario up. Like if you were in, if you're in a mall or if you're in any kind of situation, all of a sudden shots are coming off and someone gets wounded and you're there with a child, there's a child there. Are you just going to leave? Are you just going to be like, sorry, not my business, not my kid? And, that might be your math. And if that's your math, okay, that's your math. But I think there's a lot of people that we both know who would be like, nah, I'm taking responsibility for this kid. Like I'm getting this kid out of here and I'm doing it safely. So it might be that you yourself don't have kids and you don't even take them out, but we don't live in an isolated world. We go and we live and we operate around other people. And I think that if we're going to be responsible firearms owners and carriers, we need to incorporate those other people into our action plans.
Yeah, it turns the training into like a real world event, not just a entertainment uh party that you go to.
Which is fun, like absolutely fun. But we need to balance that sometimes.
Absolutely. So obviously you have that armed guardian class. That's how citizens defense research started. But you're also branching out. You have other classes that you do. You also have other instructors, Caleb Giddings being one of them, teaching a
Yes.
revolver course. Talk about some of the other offerings that you have and some of the other instructors that you have on board.
Absolutely. So the first instructor that we brought on was Chris Seipert. Chris Seipert is a former Green Beret, um, and he automatically wanted to do his home defense class. So he has his home defense class, which is really good. He talks a lot about hardening the home, making it unattractive to what he says people like me. um, and then he also does myself and Ross together did the personal protection for women class, which that's kind of instructor agnostic. Most often I'm going to be involved with that, but either Chris or Ross will come. And that's one that we've offered as well. And then we also have Chris teaches he's going to actually be starting to do an intermediate pistol as well. He also does mental agility and preparedness planning skills, which the acronym for that is MAPS, so you don't have to remember all of that. But the idea behind that class is everything that you need to mentally prepare for any kind of emergency situation, whether that is a violent criminal actor or that's a tornado or, and then trying to determine like, hey, what is the likelihood? Because I think we all get caught up, especially when we hear it in the news and stuff like that. We get caught up in the idea that like Armageddon is coming. So I need to prepare for this random weirdness over here, a mob violence or something. But really, we're much more likely to have our house burned down from fire or something like that. So one of the things that he provides, which I think is one of the best parts about the class, is an actual mathematical rubric for figuring out, hey, what should I be putting my time and attention and money into finding solutions for? And that doesn't mean that you ignore the things that you're like, hey, I think this is a big deal. It's just you figure out where on that, I guess that math you should be putting, how much energy and effort you should be putting into that. So He also helps with our our diagnostics and stuff like that. So he's done so much stuff, and I'm probably going to be forgetting something else that he teaches. Oh, his Force on Force class. That's the other one I was forgetting. He also does his Force on Force class. And I've not attended that one yet, so I'm really excited to attend it. He's got it coming up in October, and I'm going to hope to head out there. So then we have Ross. Ross is involved in the parole system in Arizona. So he's actually responsible for monitoring violent sex offenders in the state of Arizona. And he talks a lot. That's why he helps out with the personal protection for women class, because with his expertise, we can really talk about, hey, what are the actual signs that the man that you have welcomed in your life? Because let's be honest, 80% of violence that happens against women comes from a former intimate partner. So what is the likelihood that the person that you are actually with is showing signs of being a violent person, and the signs that you might actually have to defend yourself against this person? So we talk a lot about that. And that class is really geared towards pre-college girls, like teenage girls, because frankly, that's when they need to be educated. Honestly, like I want my 12-year-old to know what a potential violent man looks like before she gets in that relationship, not after she's already in an abusive relationship. So that's what we're trying to really do with that class, is get people before they go to college, instead of, oh, hey, I'm in a violent relationship. What am I going to do now? So he's also coming up with a really interesting class. We're hoping to announce it actually at the end of the week on actual target identification. And because we have so many different systems that we're trying to do, we know that we need to visually process targets, and the information that we're getting from legitimate criminals is visual for the most part. Some auditory, like if someone comes after you and says, hey, I'm going to kill you, okay, that's an auditory clue. That's, maybe they have some intent there. But for the most part, it's going to be visually based. And we are coming up with better systems for visual engagement with targets, like lights, like what some things that like John Hearn does, and also John Holsham. But it's not the same as actual threat identification, which we try to do in Force on Force, but you only get so many reps of that, right? You only get maybe 2, 3, 4 reps of that. So what he's trying to come up with is a system of constant and regular threat identification, rep after rep after rep, in the course of a single class, and not only reps to start shooting, but also reps on when to stop shooting as well. So I'm super excited about what he's coming up with. Then Caleb, of course, as you know, is doing his revolver class. And then lastly, we have Kirk Clark, who is probably the world's best shooter from concealment right now. And he is going to be working on our just technical shooting whiz bang class, the class that everyone wants to go to just get better at shooting, the one that you can go to over and over again and just shoot and shoot and shoot and just really push your technical skills. So yeah, we've got quite a few instructors, and we're doing some really, really fun stuff.
Yeah, everything sounds really awesome. I'm super excited. I'm so glad you guys came into town. We got to take that revolver course, and hopefully I'll be taking some more classes from you guys here in the future. Real quick, because we are kind of up against it. Obviously, I encourage other people to not only train with Green Ops, but train with other good, reputable training companies. Your company is one of them. How do people find you? How do we find your schedule? You travel nationwide. How do you get hosted? All of those cool things.
So our website, www.citizensdefenseresearch.com, is the best place to look for us. We do all of our events are on Eventbrite. So you can find them through our website. There'll be links there, or you can just go to Eventbrite and search for Citizens Defense Research, and you will find everything that we've listed. If you want to host us, contact us at info@citizensdefenseresearch.com, and we will get back to you. And we'd love to come out and either train with you guys or whomever would like to have us.
So one thing, and I'm going to double back. You said at the very beginning of the show, your stipulation for carrying a gun was you got to buy it, all those things, you got to train, and the person you were training with was not your husband. I'm big on that as well. Like my wife will train with other people, she will not train with me. It puts too much strain on everything, right? All parties involved. But ladies, coming to some of your women's only classes, also just reaching out to you, talking to you, trying to figure out some things, I think that could be a great resource for them because, yeah, husbands there's a few things that men feel like we do very well, like just out of the womb, one of which is shooting the gun, right? The other is driving a car. There's a couple others. We won't go there. But, and in reality, we are all really bad at it, most likely.
Yeah, there's just that dynamic. It becomes very difficult very quickly. But find us on our socials too. So Facebook, we're very active on Facebook. So yeah, if any lady wants to reach out to another lady and be like, oh, I want to strangle my husband, I hear you. So yeah, find us on Facebook, Citizens Defense Research, and also on Instagram as well.
So awesome. Make sure you're reaching out to Melody and finding her, like I said, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. Also, you can train with us at Green Ops. We're green-ops.com. You'll find our schedule for 2023, also populating for 2024. So get on that. I'm Wreck-It Luke on Instagram. We're Green Ops Podcast on Instagram. We're Green Ops Inc. on Instagram. So reach out to us there. If you are having trouble getting a hold of Melody, get a hold of me. I can make sure you guys are getting in contact. So I said it before, I'll say it again. Make sure you're training with a lot of good companies. This is one of them. Go out. The Armed Guardian is probably one of those classes that you've never thought about until right now. And you heard this podcast and you're probably thinking, yeah, you're right. Like, I'm not going to get on a 1v1. There's probably going to be other people involved. Maybe I need to learn how to deal with that. So get out there training. Mom, love you. Everybody else, we kind of like you. Hopefully we'll see you out there soon on the range.